Hey, welcome back, Better Call Saul friends. Today, we are going to go through the 5 biggest criticisms of the last 4 episodes of Better Call Saul, affectionately known as the Gene episodes. Before we get into it, spoiler alert for all of Breaking Bad, Better Call Saul, El Camino. Also, these are not necessarily my own views and my own criticisms. I have basically scoured the internet, IMDb, Reddit, YouTube, and come up with what I think are 5 pretty legitimate critiques of those last 4 episodes. But I will absolutely be telling you what I think as we go along with the video. Last thing, programming note, my next episode is going to be the much anticipated rewatch of Better Call Saul. We're going to start with episode 1 of season 1, titled Uno. So make sure you are liked and subscribed to this channel so that you can get that video when we come out with it, probably in the next week or 2. As you know, I'm working through some computer issues. I'm working on my dad's 2013 computer right now. So the video editing is going to be really basic until I get my computer situation figured out. So thanks for bearing with it. But I think I can record pretty fine and everything's going to be good to go for this video. So let's jump into it, and I'm going to start with reverse order. So probably number 1 is going to be the last one. Number 5 is going to be the first one that we'll go through. Let's start with it right now. The first criticism, the 5th biggest criticism, is that the new Jeff was not as good as the original Jeff. By now, I am sure you have heard this criticism from some fans. Not all fans, but some fans. The original Jeff was played by Don Harvey, and he was unavailable for season 6, so they had to do a recast with Pat Healy playing the new Jeff. I am personally willing to give the benefit of the doubt and a lot of latitude for a recast because things like this happen and sometimes schedules conflict, especially when there's a 2-year gap between season 5 and season 6. So that makes sense, and the recast in and of itself wasn't the issue here, at least in my mind. The issue, and this is much bigger, is that the new Jeff was not anything like the original Jeff. The original Jeff, OG Jeff, was menacing, he was scary, his motives were questionable. He is a complete wild card. Yet when Gene confronts new Jeff in his mom's house, in Marion's house, he turns into a sniveling coward. He's completely under the thumb of Gene with no backbone, no moxie, and no intrigue. He's a completely different guy. And this, by the way, isn't a critique of the actor, because from everything that I have seen, Pat Healy played the role exactly the way the writers wanted him to. So some people might say, well, you know, Scott, this all changed because now Gene is on the offense. When he goes into Marion's house, he's in Jeff's house, he's on the offense. So of course, Jeff's MO has changed. But I'm confused because this was a complete 180. This wasn't like a tweak or a change. This was just a complete 180. And it all happened because Gene figured out where you lived. And he pulled some really small con on your mom involving a fake dog. It's honestly, it's stretching it in my mind, especially because Jeff still has the obvious upper hand in that he knows that Saul is a wanted man. So even if he didn't have much of an interest to turn in Saul because, you know, maybe Jeff genuinely likes Saul Goodman, he likes his ads, it's still odd that his character changes completely just because Gene surprises him at his house while Gene has a lot more confidence than he had in the mall the last time they saw each other. Others have also said, you know, paraphrasing here, well, the character changes depending on how Gene looks at him. We're seeing Jeff through Gene's eyes. And since his confidence and his outlook has changed in those different scenes between the mall and in Marion's house, then we're seeing Jeff in a new way along with Gene. The problem that I have with that analysis is that it's never happened before once in the series. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think we've ever had the experience where Jimmy/Gene/Saul interacts with the exact same character and sees him in 2 completely different lights because of a change in circumstances. And in my mind, that's too big of a leap of faith for an audience member to go along with when there is no evidence of this being the case or having been done before. Excuse me. So I can't just go along with the idea that we're just seeing Jeff in a completely new light along with Gene because it's never been done before. And man, it's just too big of a leap for me. So to a lot of people, the Jeff scenes in the last 4 episodes were a letdown. And depending on the person, this actually might be higher up on the list of criticisms. I've got it at number 5, but it could be higher up. Let's go into the fourth biggest criticism, and I've kind of compiled two together, but the fourth biggest criticism is that the pacing of the Gene episodes and the storyline of those episodes went on for too long, and we could have used more of the Breaking Bad version of Saul instead of all 4 Gene episodes. So I did cheat a little bit, and I put 2 criticisms in one, but I do think they're related. The main question that this criticism brings up is, did we really need 4 Gene episodes? Did we need as much time in the Gene timeline as we got? So let's start there. There's a number of people in my comments as well as in other places who have said things like, I can't quite put my finger on it, but the whole feel of the last 4 episodes, it feels off. Others have had more pointed critiques of the general scheme and storyline of the last 4 episodes, including not liking the pacing as they felt it was too slow. They didn't... Man, tough cough. Sorry about that, guys. They didn't feel like enough was happening in those last 4 episodes, and they felt like it was filler. There's too much filler in there. Speaking of filler, there are others who were not overly impressed with Walt and Jesse's cameos, as they didn't feel like it added too much, if anything, to the general storyline. As a reminder, since it's been a whole month, we had Walt and Jesse kidnap Saul in the RV. We had Jesse meet Kim outside of Saul's offices after Kim and Saul signed the divorce papers. We had a Saul flashback with Mike talking about Walt, which led him to walk into Walt's chemistry room, which we saw in Breaking Bad. And we had Walt and Saul in the bunker of the vacuum cleaner guys' place. To these critics, those scenes were nice, but they were not necessary to the actual story, and they could have done more with those cameos. Now that actually leads me to my next point here, which is that some people don't feel like we had enough time for Jimmy to become Saul. Now after Kim leaves him in Season 6, Episode 9, Fun and Games, we get that flash forward time jump, and he's Saul, and he immediately becomes Saul in the bed with the escort. Now, a number of people have said they would have liked at least one full episode of Jimmy descending into Saul instead of that time jump. Perhaps he's thinking of Kim, and we see him, instead of thinking about Kim, distract himself with some kind of a scheme. Like that's the general MO that some of these people wanted to see. I also get the feeling that a number of these critics were secretly hoping for an extended period of time in the Breaking Bad timeline. Sure, we did get flashbacks, but we never stayed there for too long. So I think a lot of the criticism here comes from a place of, one, missing Breaking Bad, as well as thinking it would have been nice to see more of Saul in that timeline, working through whatever issues the writers felt appropriate for the story, including Jimmy becoming Saul and how that evolved over time. The third biggest criticism, and this isn't necessarily of the actual story, but it relates to the last 4 episodes, is Peter Gould and Vince Gilligan hyped it up too much. They hyped up the last 4 episodes way too much. Going into those episodes, there was a lot of praise and promotion already being put out. Some of you might be saying, well, Scott, what did you expect from a series finale? And of course, that's right. You would expect the writers and the showrunners to really like the product that they've come up with, unless they came up with something like the last season of House of Cards, which no one should be proud of, frankly. There was so much early praise of the finale and really the last 4 episodes that I actually did a video titled, Will Better Call Saul Stick the Landing? Thoughts from Peter Gould, Bob Odenkirk, and Ray Seahorn. Here is some of what they said. Peter Gould said that people would be, quote, stunned and surprised. Ray Seahorn said it raised and answered some big questions. Peter Gould said it's very different from any other TV show that I'm aware of. I could go on and on, but I'll just share one more with you, and this one's from Vince Gilligan, the co-creator of the show. On the very last Talking Saul, the TV show that AMC put on after the 12th episode titled Waterworks, and it was Peter, it was Vince, it was Ray and Bob on the show talking about the show. When they were asked what to expect for the finale, Vince Gilligan said to, quote, put on your adult diapers. And so you were expecting some giant crazy twist in that last episode, given what Vince said there. So given this lavish praise, some people feel like it simply did not live up to the hype. going back to the Peter Gould quote, what was unlike anything that he had seen on TV? What happened in the last 4 episodes that was unlike anything that he has seen on TV? Was it the black and white? Was it having a flashback as well as a current timeline as well as a flash forward? What exactly did he mean by that? Because, obviously, Gene, Saul, Jimmy ending up in jail. I mean, we've seen people end up in jail before on TV, so it can't necessarily be that. So I'm curious to hear what you think on what Peter Gould actually meant by unlike anything he's seen on TV before. The next point I want to mention is that Ray was correct, that it did raise and answer some big questions. Can people change? Are we set on this path and we can't get off of it? Or can we, make amends? As Chuck said, it's never too late to change your course. I think they really did answer some big questions there. But I'm really not sure what Vince is referring to when he said to put on your adult diapers for the series finale. What in there would make us, lose all control and kind of go crazy in that finale? I thought it was well done. I liked it, as I said in my last video, but I am a little confused by that. So if you bought all of the hype that they were putting out, which I admittedly did, it might have caused you to feel slightly disappointed. To be clear, I do not feel disappointed, but I am curious how some of the commentary lines up and connects to the actual show, as I brought up in those questions just a couple seconds ago. The second biggest criticism that I've seen is the earlier Gene scenes were a letdown in terms of what we actually got. So it's hard to live up to much held anticipation because for 6 years we've been asking ourselves, what's going on with Gene? Where is Kim? Where is Jeff? Is Huel still sitting on that bed? What's going to happen next in that flash forward Gene timeline? Or I guess maybe that's the current timeline. However you think about it, what's going to happen next in that Gene timeline? Simply put, for a lot of people, the anticipation from seasons 1 to 5 about what would happen to Gene did not live up to what we actually experienced. As a commenter on my most recent video, Studio of Shred, said, and I'm just going to quote him here, he said, "My biggest gripe with the Better Call Saul ending was that the Gene scenes at the beginning of each season do not feel richer for having been given the ending. For instance, what's the deal with Jeff the cab driver? Well, he's just some guy who happened to recognize Saul/Gene. I'm also thinking what it would be like to watch the entire show a second time. Jeff and Marion feel like they were pulled out of nowhere to finish Gene's story and not part of a bigger plan or reason. Come to think of it, why did we need the Gene story at all, other than to know what happened to Saul after Breaking Bad? But I'd like to have seen the black and white Gene story but I'd also like to have seen the black and white Gene story be more connected to the story in the Better Call Saul timeline, so it feels that there's a reason to watch it other than the finale." That's really well said, and that's a lot of different criticisms kind of balled up into one. So Studio Shred, great way of putting it. Thank you for commenting. I do not have much to add right there. I would love to hear what you think about these questions. And again, speaking of rewatches, we're going to be doing a rewatch of Better Call Saul on this channel very, very soon. So make sure you're tuned in for that. But again, the big criticism here is that, maybe this wasn't a part of a bigger overall plan. Maybe they didn't know what was going to happen with Gene until, the very end of the show. And that's actually the case. They didn't really know Gene was going to go to jail until I think when they were filming season 5. But did they have the story arc about what would happen with Jeff and Marion in seasons 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5? I don't think so. And so yeah, you can see the criticism there, and I can also see that myself as well. So let me know if you think the Gene scenes earlier from the earlier seasons were a letdown in terms of what we actually got. The biggest criticism, and again, this may not even be a criticism of the actual show, but how it's structured. And this criticism is the better ending for the TV show Better Call Saul would have been to end it at episode 9, Fun and Games, where Kim leaves Jimmy, and then they put the final 4 episodes of Gene as a separate entity, as maybe a spin-off or as a movie like we saw with El Camino after Breaking Bad. So again, this is less a criticism of the story, the writing, the acting, and more of a critique about how we watched the show and the order in which we watched it. What if Better Call Saul had ended the show at episode 9, and then we had an epilogue strictly for those Gene scenes that hit theaters, for instance, over the holidays? The timing would have worked out perfectly in 2022. I know that sounds familiar because that's basically what we had with Breaking Bad and El Camino, although we did have to wait 6 whole years for El Camino. But can you imagine, for instance, if Breaking Bad had ended not with Walter's death, but instead with El Camino and Jesse's escape to Alaska? Breaking Bad, especially for the last 6 episodes, had overwhelming positive reviews on it. Meanwhile, El Camino, which was a fine movie in its own right, it was nowhere near the level of Breaking Bad. So if you had put the end of El Camino at the end of Breaking Bad, it probably would have lessened the experience for some people. And obviously, it would have been a mistake to not end the show with Walt because he was the main character. So it's not an apples to apples comparison, but you get the point that I'm saying. Ending of Breaking Bad was viewed much, much higher and more regarded than the ending or than the whole movie of El Camino. I think the same is true with the last 3 episodes of the Better Call Saul timeline, which in my mind is Plan and Execution, episode 7, Point and Shoot, episode 8, and then Fun and Games, episode 9. If you compare those last 3 episodes of the Better Call Saul timeline with the last 4 episodes of the show, the Gene episodes, you put those up, I think the Better Call Saul timeline, those last 3 episodes, are far superior to the last 4 episodes of the series, the Gene episodes. That does not mean the last 4 episodes of the series were bad, because they had really, really stiff competition. Another thing to consider here is that the actual feel of the last 4 episodes was different from the rest of the series, and naturally so. It's 6 years removed from the Better Call Saul timeline, and it's even after a completely different show, Breaking Bad. We were not able to have as many stars of Better Call Saul in those Gene episodes because they've either left Albuquerque, they've died, or they have no justifiable reason to still be in the show. If we had separated the Better Call Saul timeline from the Gene timeline, would that have made critics happier? And would that have made the viewing experience more pleasurable? I'm curious to hear what you think. I think I personally would have enjoyed it either way, but if I could have my druthers and I can just make up a scenario, I think it would have been nice to have Gene as a separate movie that comes out, over the Christmas break. Because let's face it, the Better Call Saul timeline did end with episode 9, Fun and Games, when Kim left and Jimmy becomes Saul. And Gene's a completely different storyline. It's 6 years apart. There's different characters. So I think it could have worked really well as a standalone project. But I would love to hear what you think on that point, as well as all of these other 5 criticisms that I have come up with. So that's all I've got for today's episode. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know in the comments if you agree or disagree with any of these points, and stay tuned because we're going to be doing that rewatch very shortly. All right, have a great day. Bye.